Hey there. Welcome to week 31 of our Chakra Wisdom Oracle Toolkit, a 52-week journey of self-discovery with the Lost Fables. And at this point in week 31, we are stepping into the fifth chakra. And one of the things I like to do when I shift into a new chakra, we're in a new, we talk about rhythms of seven. It's very interesting because especially with astrology, they talk about, 7 years, the 7-year itch, 7-year cycles. So when we look at seven and the repetition of seven, and we even look at, 7 is lucky, 3 sevens, 21. So we can look at how the numbers start to make sense as they come together. Now, that said, we are on the fifth chakra of blue, throat chakra. And one of the things I've talked about extensively with the fifth chakra is that it's the manifesting chakra. But the other thing that came forward to me is that it's also the magnetizing chakra. So when we manifest and we create things in our lives as a female energy, right? And whether you're male or female, if you carry a female energy, it's going to be magnetizing that makes the difference. So manifesting is a masculine energy and magnetizing is feminine. That's why sometimes when, as women, or feminine energy, as I said, we can turn around and create something. We can manifest it, but in order to maintain it, we have to energetically magnetize it as women. I want to give you an example, which I've been saying lately, which is because I've been flying so much. If you think about an airplane, right? And sometimes if you've flown, they'll come over and say, well, folks, we have to be towed into the gate. So there's this massive airplane that has this teeny little, I want to say car, if you will, or kind of semi-Jeep, that literally, almost like a golf cart, and it literally drags this how many ton airplane into the gate. And part of that is magnetizing, is that energy. It's a smaller, more subtle energy that women use. However, when we magnetize, we can keep it because it's a feminine energy that vibrates with our own. So the next time you're looking at manifesting something and you say, oh, I want to manifest XYZ or what have you, yes, you want to do that. And yet, as it starts to show up, you have to step into your feminine energy. And sometimes what happens is we forget that feminine energy is much more subtle than masculine energy, which brings us to the card of the week, the fable of the week, if you will. It's interesting because the name of the fable is Blue November. And I've always loved this fable. The card in itself, the card in the Chakra Wisdom Oracle deck is Bittersweet. And if you look at the imagery, part of what I like about working with artists that are different and unique is that I send them the manuscript and then they create the card. So in this case, Gretchen had read the fable and then she created it. And so we can look at here, this is the first card in the seventh chakra. So what are you looking at? You're looking at the first chakra energy, which is the natural inclination of disappointment. So if we think about that, manifesting and magnetizing can have some disappointment to it. And part of that is we have to give up in order to create space for something else. So it's kind of like you may have to go through, just hypothetically, I'm not saying this is going to happen to you, like a breakup, going through a breakup, which can be bittersweet, but on the other side, when you meet the right person for you, it has that energy of everything was worth it. So a couple things. I know I'm always yawning when I get on with you guys. I don't know. So if you look at this very carefully, you can see the birthday cake, which of course represents the birthday child in the fable. And you can see the doves, and there's 2 of them. And you can also see the idea of the spirited woman coming to help. So a couple things I want to say about Bittersweet. Before we even get into the actual workbook this week, I want to just share with you that in order to manifest, we must be willing to and be able to work with emotional loss, because one of the things that happens sometimes is we get all excited. We're going to do this project. We're going to get out there and do it. And the next thing we know, well, we create it, but we lose it. Or, you know, I've had people say to me, oh my gosh, I got right down the wire with this deal, and then it fell apart, and they never try again. And some of the things that come forward to me about the first card in the fifth chakra is, are you sending your message out in the most congruent way? And, you know, the thing to keep in mind in this fable as well is that the pain in the fable, it's natural, you know, and I want to say this because I think so much of the time we spend in our lives avoiding pain. And I remember that when I buried my dad in Arlington, I had his cremated remains. And at that time, it was just after 9/11, we had to drive them down there. And so I was with my friend Linda, and we get to Arlington, and I had his remains, and, you know, we were sitting there waiting for the rabbi to come in. My father was Jewish, so I chose, even though he really wasn't practicing, I still chose a rabbi to speak at his funeral. It wasn't the funeral, it was, you know, putting him in the ground. Because I think that that's kind of like, anyway, I was honoring his idea of life. And anyway, so I was standing there, we're kind of waiting with the remains, and my friend Linda said to me, gosh, this is so sad. It's just so sad. And I said, I'm actually finding it quite poignant. And in that moment, I understood the definition of bittersweet, because there was such a sweetness to the idea that, and an honor that I was getting to bury my father in Arlington. That's so sweet. And so it has such a wonderful honor for someone's life, you know, to be honored, especially for their military service. World War II, my father served. And, you know, here was this other side to it, which is, of course, it's bitter. It's like losing my father. It's a horrible, you know, emotional experience. And at the same time, there was such a joy to get to honor this life. So here was this 21 gun salute, and I literally took his remains, and I was able to put the remains in the ground. And that is, for me, an example of bittersweet, something that is deeply honored at this and has a happiness to it. At the same time, there's a loss and a sadness. And I think you'll find in this particular piece in the toolkit, you will find this is actually a poem that I actually found my mother had written. It was just a piece of paper that she had written after, you know, before she died. Hi, baby. Yeah, we love you. Okay. And she had written before she died. And the thing that, thank you so much. I know he loves my lipstick. Hi, baby. So I know. It's what, baby? You okay? He doesn't want to talk to me all day, and now suddenly he's like, I'm interested. So the Fable of Blue November is actually a poem written by my late mother, and it was, if you think about the time it was written, in the time frame, it was actually written in 1963, which of course we know Blue November was, Kennedy was assassinated. And you know, the interesting thing about this is it wasn't, you know, and I look back at this and I said, oh, it was me and you know, the whole time period. But it actually was much more along the lines of, you know, here it was my birthday, the birthday child, you know, is being honored. And at the same time, a beloved president had been assassinated. So if you look at that time period and you put it into that time period, you can get how there was a universal understanding of that bittersweet moment. And something that I want to point out to you is that this card has a tremendous amount of emotional maturity that we must master and contain our energy in order to magnetize and manifest. In order to cleanly express from our fifth chakra, we really need to be in that energy of recognizing that we are going to lose something when something good happens. And to give you an example, here I go again, my yawning. Thank goodness you guys are deep into this, because you're used to me yawning. But, you know, just to give you an example of that, you know, we are, when we look at the idea of Blue November and the idea of the surrounding energy, we can really get the idea that we need to know when something great happens. There's also something that we're losing. So it's sometimes, sometimes it's like, I should be so excited about my new home, but I kind of feel sad. Well, let's look at that. I lived in a really cool apartment complex and I liked it when I moved to Asheville. And then, my next thing was I bought a house, and people were like, oh, are you excited? I'm like, yeah, but I also had to lose the convenience of renting, which means I didn't have to worry about a water main break at 9 o'clock at night during a blizzard. You know what I mean? That wasn't my problem. So there are things that when we look at Bittersweet, there is a maturity that must be taken on. And yet the sadness is there too, of like, oh, I'm leaving this behind. So one of the powerful lessons I feel here in this first card, which means it has first chakra energy, right? And that also has, and it's blue, so it's communication. But think about it this way. If we look at that first chakra energy as our DNA, then we're actually looking at the first chakra as how do we respond to challenges. One of the things I learned, and I know I'm telling a few stories tonight, but I kind of like, sometimes I'll tell more, sometimes I'll tell less. But, when I look back on things, when I was pursuing a career in voiceover a long time ago, people would say to me, well, not right now, call back in 6 months. And I would get all excited because I go, they said call back in 6 months. And people would be like, they're just getting rid of you. They're blowing you off. They're trying to get you away from them. And I was like, oh, well, I didn't really think that. I mean, I thought that, but then I was like, no, they want me to call. So sure enough, I'd go and work on my stuff. And 6 months later, I'd say, you told me to call you and I have some new material. I'd love to. And I kept doing that and I kept doing that. And I let them know I wouldn't go away. And that bittersweet, that thing of like, I want to do this and I know I'm good. And that idea of loss eventually turned into the win. But I understood that the platform I was on was going to have some sadness to it. Once you give up a struggle, it's something you've been used to. It's a pattern, and that struggle is over. So now you have to live into it. So when we look at Bittersweet, which we're going to do right now, when we look at Bittersweet, let's take a look at the idea of, and I say this all the time, the idea of and this is the focus of the week, a window is opened as a door gently closes. And we just talked about that. But what's important here is I always say, yeah, that's true, but the hallways are a bitch. So it's kind of like, yeah, the door opens, something else closes, that kind of, but you've got to get through the hallway. And that means sometimes life is about just trudging along. So the message of the week really in this fable is that, let's see, a couple things I want to say is that this is one of 3 fables in the book that were poems that I found from my mother that I energetically, spirit was like, this is it. This is what this one is. And so I used these 3 poems. Blue November is one of them. And I'm wondering down below, can you list what the other 2 poems / fables in the book are? Curious to see if you know what they are. Okay, so let's see. I know what I'm going to say. In here, it talks about the bittersweet feelings about transitions. And so one of the things I want to say to you is the thing that I learned to master with this work was the idea that it was bittersweet when I achieved what I said I wanted to. It wasn't just, wow, I'm a published author. It was, oh, wow, I'm a published author. Nobody knows it. It's like, and then there's another part to it, working super hard on getting things out there and letting people know about the work. And so that constant thing of, having to deal with the next step of whatever that looks like. So it's very important that I mention that to you. So let me go back with the glasses and the yawn here. Okay. One of the things to keep in mind, and I love that this says this here, is that part of this work is that with Bittersweet, there's a deep longing to find yourself. And there can be a sadness to that, because sometimes when we find an answer, and I've seen this happen with clients of mine, they really had a challenging time with a family member that they turned away from 15 years ago or what have you, and they come to me and we're working on these things. Bittersweet comes up and we really work through, they do, I kind of hold space, I have to be honest. But that's the best way to have a breakthrough, is that you have it. Someone doesn't have it for you. But I ask questions. And I remember sitting there and this woman got it. She's like, you know what? I have to make this amends with my mother. It was super important to her. She made a plan that she was going to go home. And the day she got home, her mother died. So she missed that window by an hour. And so this is something that we can look at this and go, that's completely tragic. And, you know, she could beat the heck out of herself. Thank goodness she was doing so much of this work. And she really understood and got the humor of it and said, you know, that's just like my mother. This is our whole relationship. She would die right before I'm ready to come around, you know? And that was the thing that she had to deal with, was that it wasn't her creating this. It was the pattern of her mother, that the minute someone else was ready, her mother would go, well, I don't want it now. And this is when she saw that, it was such an upliftment. So when we look at Bittersweet, it is about facing who we are. It is about recognizing that we are not going to, and there's a maturity, as I said, we're not going to take our feelings and paste them on someone else. Now that's what she had done for years in her pattern with her mother. But look how it changed after she'd recognized she needed to go back and sit down with her mother and just be in the room with her, you know, because she had changed. And so she was going to see something different. And so the minute that happened and she and I talked, she called me, and it was like, oh yeah, you know, it's like, this was the pattern my mother had my whole life with me. Anytime, it had to be on her terms all the time. There was no real relationship. And she got to see how she carried that on. So one of the things we want to look at with Bittersweet is, what are our root dynamics? What have we brought in from our family of origin? So that's something also I'd love to hear your comments below about, what kind of dynamic did I come in with? What kind of dynamic in Bittersweet that seems to be always have some kind of tinge of sadness when I achieve something? And sometimes, especially in my case, I'm gonna give you an example, with money, you know, and that's the thing, is that money always was bittersweet for my father. So it's kind of like, you know, I can create it, and yet it has a bittersweet tinge to it, and I have to work through it. So the thing is, and I say this, a very important thing, that we begin with the personal expression, and this personal expression this week begins a 7-week journey. And take a moment to look at where you are from where you came through your heart. And, you know, I want to say that the heart chakra is about magnetizing, and the fifth chakra is about manifesting. So as a female energy, you want to make sure that your heart is in it, or it's going to be hard to maintain. So let's see. Okay. This is an interesting thing that it says here. I always feel like, oh, I wrote that. But it says the circumstances of your life reveals your participation in it. So the circumstances are going to show the game you're playing. Like, you know, for example, if I have set up, you know, when you walk in my house, you see the dog corner, the dog toys. So the circumstances are such that my living room is set up for my life, which includes my boys. So that's something you're going to see. So the circumstances of how you live, how you set things up, really show the life you're living. And that is fifth chakra stuff, folks, because that's like expression. What am I manifesting? You want to see what's going on in your life, start right here and look at the beliefs and ideas you brought from your family of origin when we look at the first card in blue. So obviously I talked about JFK in here. Let's see. I'm going to skip some of this because this fable is about sadness mixed with joy, a feeling that we all understand. And I think we all understand it, but I don't think we can process it. And so that's something I really have learned over the years in working with these fables, is that there's a difference between understanding something and having the ability to process it. So as I say that to you, this week is about processing that experience. So let's see. I want to just, okay, so it says, look at how clear. This week is about looking at how clear your communications are. And, you know, part of what I like to do, the reason I like to do this and guide you through it is because there's information in here that says basically what I'm saying, but there's something about hearing the stories and having things jump off the page that make it so much more alive. So this entire 7 weeks is about what have you manifested, what are you manifesting or creating, and how do you express your needs? Are you clear, or are you getting muddled and therefore the results are muddled? So we want to look here at, let's see. I'm kind of feeling my energy right now. Obviously on Monday you read the fable, but I think it's important to look at the color. So if you look at the color reflection, because it's almost a midnight blue in this, if you think about it, we can call it navy, but it really isn't midnight blue. And it can go to the deepest part of ourselves, because we look at that as, you know, the night, right? So it's if you think about it, your shadow side. And I think that it's very important here that when you read this section of color and you look at what are your dark truths, what are they for you? And I think that this may be a crossroad time of looking at what is your truth? Are you being you, or are you twisting yourself? And I would say twisty to be somebody else for somebody else. So can you see that it may be time to go or grow in a particular situation? The journal journeying this week is really about really looking at how you occur in terms of worry and joy. And so I would say that to you, you know, looking at the journey this week. One of the other things I really want to encourage you, if you haven't already done it, I loved creating this as a fable group. When I had the weekly group, it was always helpful because, and one of the things I want to encourage you in now that you've come so far, you don't need to do this book in order. If you want to start a fable group, for example, you can simply, and I did this is how I created the group. I took and at the time I didn't even have the cards didn't exist. I put the names, you can use the cards obviously, but I put them on index cards, the names, and we would pull one out and read that fable. So when you're doing a mastermind group, or if you're doing a spiritual meeting with somebody where you want to really work on something energetically together, it's a great tool to use to pull out the card and then go through the exercises with the other person, or in particular, if you're doing a mastermind group each week, you do the group activity, which is on a Thursday. So sharing that with you becomes important because this work is meant to be ultimately shared. It's meant to come off the page and brought into an arena that's safe for you to communicate who you are and really not be fixed. So be aware of when people express feelings this week. Are you fixing them, or are you honoring their process? So when we look at, I would say really focus this week on, you know, what you will have to give up when you gain something new. I mean, it really sounds trite, but I'm going to say it's like, you know, you may have a car that you've driven for 10 years and you're getting a new one. We have to give up the old car, right? We become attached to objects. We have sentimental value to some of them. So remember that is part of Bittersweet, is that there's a sentiment to it that is meant to be honored. And if we go back to the completion card in the first chakra, right, we're looking here, think about that as a first chakra energy. So what I would say to you also is, really recognizing that the meditation is about stepping into that dark hallway and discovering that you're okay in a process. And sometimes, when I went back, by the way, 6 months later, to those people who said they were genuinely surprised, and this one guy I called, he said, "Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you call me in 2 more months?" Well, I looked up and I saw he was going to be doing an appearance that week. I was in LA and I lived in LA at the time. He was going to be doing a speaking engagement at a women's group I belonged to. And I was like, oh, really? And I beat my way there. I got over there and it was one of those 8 a.m. things. So if you know me, that was a little tough. I got there at 7:30, checked in. They're having this round the table, what you need and sharing. And I look out into the hallway through the glass door. I see him on the other side of the lobby and I get up because I'm going to go talk to him. And the person at the door said to me, you really have to stay. You can't go out there. And I go, why? I'm going out in the hallway. And she's like, you really can't. I said, I can. And I walked right past her and yeah, bitch. But the thing is, I went over and talked to him. And I said, hey, and I called him by his star sign because I knew what he was. I said, hey, Gemini. And he looks up at me and he said, do I know you? And I refreshed the meeting we had and that he had told me to call him in 6 months and how funny that he's here. And we just clicked for a minute. We talked about a couple things and he said, do me a favor, just call me tomorrow. We'll set up a meeting next week. And I did understand that I had to go through that hallway, that long hallway to get where I wanted to go. But remember, you've probably heard me say this, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, don't pitch a freaking tent there. Just keep going and you will get where you need to go. Remember that the road you pick will always be bittersweet. There are ups and downs. So you might as well pick the thing you care most about in the world because it's going to feel just as bad to work at a yucky job as it will during the process of getting where you want to go. So that said, I encourage you to really work through some of the lessons of what Bittersweet is about this week. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Please, please, please comment below. I love to hear what you have to say and I comment on them. Comment below, what is it that you learned about having courage and walking through challenging times? And I look forward to hearing from you and I will see some of you next week. Have a great week, everybody. Bye for now.